think there are many important lessons to be learned when you've been off a road for 20 years and you go back to that road and you discover that so many things have happened while you were gone and you don't know exactly where you are anymore. My journey to return to publishing has been fraught with these strange discoveries, and I want to share one of them with you today. In the 70s and 80s, when I was having books coming out from all the major publishers and the major science fiction magazines and journals and collections and anthologies, I had a reputation for the cleanest copy in the business. That was a century ago, at least it was in the last century. So now that I've returned to publishing and I'm doing everything myself for the first time, I've realized with a shock that my copy isn't clean anymore. You see, now I'm 70 years old and I've always written, I would type and would just come streaming out. And now I've discovered that the pathway between my brain and my fingers isn't quite as unobstructed as it used to be. For example, I think I've typed something and I discover that I didn't. But the problem is, you see, because I read so fast, I also don't see that what's on the page isn't actually what I wrote. It's little things like starting a word and my fingers, who are so fluent, have typed a different word that is a word that rhymes with the word that I heard in my head. Or they left out a crucial word like not, thus making the sentence mean the opposite of what I heard. In the 70s and 80s, copy editors were the bane of my existence, because when the copy came back, I can say quite honestly that 95% of the emendations that they put in were actually wrong. They would add commas according to some detailed style sheet where often the rhythm was interrupted or the thought process of the character was no longer easy to understand. It would be things like that. I remember once, my first novel, in fact, the copy editor added 1,000 commas to my book, which I spent a lot of time removing. And when I sent it back, of course, my publisher completely agreed. Now, the thing is that I've discovered that what I see and what I hear are no longer quite as congruent. And because of that, I'm beginning to understand that despite the fact that 30 years ago, I was sending in perfect copy to my editors at the publishing houses, now I really need someone, a second pair of eyes, to look through it. When I first started to self-publish my books, basically I was taking books that had previously been published, and my whole emphasis was on making printed copies available in a world where you could no longer order them from the publisher. So the first books I produced were scanned copies, and the major objective was to have them printed and available on Amazon or wherever. After a while, people kept asking me when there would be ebooks. And that's actually when I realized that there was a very difficult learning curve, because to correct a scanned copy into digital format, it was as much or more of a problem than actually to retype the whole book from beginning to end. Then, when it came to new books, that's when the fun, I suppose, really started. Because while on the one hand, I feel that I'm standing at the edge of whole new worlds of books that I would like to create, and that I feel that I'm in a sort of frenzy of creation in some ways. The old apparatus combined with the still young creative process is not that great a match. So lately, again, I've discovered that that what I typed and what I read as what I typed is often not actually what got published. So now I'm going through a process of having them all quite carefully copy edited and proofread again by a professional. You'll probably see my books sort of slowly metamorphose into somewhat improved versions of themselves. So I wanted to say that if you somehow have received a copy of a book with a lot of rather peculiar and even incomprehensible typos in them, that's probably because it hasn't been through this second process yet. If somehow you can contact me, perhaps through my website or elsewhere, I'll eventually end up sending you an updated ebook once they are set up. This is really only the case with the 4 or 5 most recent books. I want to tell all of you that I'm really thrilled that you continue to support me. One of my recent books was number 1 in 3 categories on Amazon, despite having some quite obvious glitches. If you are one of my supporters, please hang in there. The book that I actually wrote will eventually be the one that you can possess. Thank you.